Frank Cespedes, what a treat to have you back on the podcast, to be able to interview a true thought leader in the sales space to talk about the future of sales. You write for Harvard Business. You're a senior lecturer at Harvard. You're the author of Sales Management That Works, How to Sell in a World That Never Stops Changing. And you're on the boards of AI sales tech companies, and I'm sure maybe others. And you have proven real-world experience operating a business. There's no one better to talk to about the future of sales. So let's get right into it. And well, first off, thank you for being here, by the way. How's your day?
Chris, thank you very much for that gracious introduction. It's good to hear somebody saying something positive about Harvard these days. Pleasure to be back with you.
And another thing I have to say is what I love about your work is you're not a sales methodology. Your work is based on true research and the facts, and you cut through the bullshit. And yes, we can cuss and speak French on this channel. And also you're a Boston guy. So I lived in Boston for 3 years. The people there, they get to the truth. So that's one thing I love about you. But let's get into talking about the future of sales in chapter 1 of your book, which again, I love the cover, man. It looks so nice. It talks about the Bureau of Labor Statistics saying that in 2019, 11% of the workforce was sellers. I think that was the statistic. I'm sure that has evolved now. Sales roles increased in the 21st century. Now, where are we at? What percentage at a high level of jobs are from sales? How is that fluctuating, changing? And more broadly, what is the future of sales looking like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I'd start, Chris, with 2 comments. First, about that 11% figure, and then, the heart of your question, what's going on now? That 11% figure is almost certainly significantly underestimated because that 11% figure is what companies report as, quote, sales jobs. But the majority of business development jobs, we can call them whatever we want, associates, partners, managing directors, but you and I both know that those people do selling for a living. The majority of those jobs are not listed as sales jobs for Department of Labor statistics purposes. They're called something else, but they are sales. So that 11% figure is the minimum figure. It's probably 2x, 3x that.
Wow.
In other words, a huge part of our economy. Now, what is changing? Let me begin with what's not, all right? Because there's been a narrative that still hangs around and that's been very, very common for about 2 decades. It arose when e-commerce became a big deal. Now you'll hear the same discourse about AI and sales. And the notion is that these technologies are, quote, disintermediating salespeople or making them unnecessary, redundant. First, as you pointed out, the number of sales jobs in the United States, even according to the narrow Bureau of Labor Statistics definition, has been increasing even as the dispersion of the internet increases. And secondly, it's a narrative that, in my experience, and if I can be unhumble, I think my experience is pretty good. I interact with a lot of executives.
Yeah.
But when I ask them, what do you think e-commerce is as a percentage of total U.S. retail sales, I routinely get estimates from 30 to 60%. And the reality is that e-commerce spiked during the pandemic for obvious reasons, right? When stores are closed or held to 25 or 50% of their capacity, obviously you're going to have more buying and selling online. But it spiked during the pandemic from about 11% to 17%. It has since declined to about 16%, 16. Remember the estimates, 30 to 60%. This narrative has taken hold. Many executives are orders of magnitude out of touch with this basic fact about buying and selling. So that's my comment about what's not happening. What is happening, sales is not going out of business, but it is changing, and it is changing significantly along a number of dimensions. It is obviously much more data driven. AI will accelerate that, and also, I predict, will help. Sales is becoming much more demanding of salespeople. And the reason is that buyers get their information about products, about pricing, about competitive offerings. They now get that information from many different sources besides a salesperson or the company website. As a result, when the salesperson does have customer contact, they've got to add value. And that's a big deal. I mean, if we are honest, many salespeople for years were basically organic, walking, talking versions of product and pricing literature. AI can do that a lot better than human beings in many ways. Now, when you show up, you have to add value, but that's what we should expect. In a healthy, competitive market, the bar is always rising. And right now, sales, in my opinion, is exhibit A for that perennial dynamic.
So humans as sellers, we need to add value in a world of AI. And so let's get into how AI is shaping sales in particular. What are the areas where sellers add value? And I feel like you'll have a great perspective based on what actual C-levels or customers are saying. Like, where does the seller actually add value in the sales process in an AI world?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a cliche, but like most cliches, it has a core kernel of truth in it, especially in B2B sales, especially in tech B2B sales. Selling is about problem identification, what's the relevant solution, working with the customer to understand that, mutual education, and so forth. That is fundamentally where salespeople add value. And by the way, that's why I don't tie myself to a methodology. The way you do that, which is fundamentally what methodologies are about, the way you do that varies. Most important thing about selling is the buyer. So the methodology has to fit with the buying process. And, sales training firms that tell you their methodology is good here, it's good on Jupiter, it's good on Mars. That's nonsense, all right? Each methodology is good for certain things and not others. That's where sales adds value. Now, how does AI impact that? In the short term, I think what you're going to see with AI when it is supported by smart sales management, and that is very, very important, right? Any tool is only as good as the people who design it and use it. AI is not an exception to that. But in the short term, I think AI will, in fact, have some of its biggest impact on sales because you can measure it and because it deals with a core issue in sales. I'm going to step back. Again, Professor Frank, I'll cite a little data.
Fun, man. It's great to be in class with you.
If you ask yourself a very basic question about sales, and that is how much time does a salesperson on average spend in customer contact? And by customer contact, I don't simply mean making a pitch either, virtually or in person. I mean all forms of customer contact. Emails, demos, and etc. The data varies obviously by company and industry, but on average, what the research tells us, it's only about 30 to 35% of the average salesperson's time. Now, imagine if you can make that 40 or 45%, or, nirvana, 50% or more. Not only is that a big productivity increase in most organizations, it also increases the addressable market of the selling company because segments that were economically infeasible now become feasible with better go-to-market utilization. That's where AI can and is already helping by either eliminating or reducing the time for all the administrative tasks that salespeople have to do. Content marketing, AI can do that pretty well. We're not talking here
Yeah.
about Shakespeare or or Goethe with most content marketing, research, etc. So that I think in the short term is where AI will help. Longer term, and I think there's a big issue in tech. Longer term, what AI can do, again, supported by good management, is upskilling. I mean, the analogy I like to use is think about what AI will do over the next 5 years to a nurse practitioner in medical care or a paralegal in a law firm. It will just increase their ability to do X, Y, or Z, freeing up more time for the more expensive doctors and partners to do things. Same is true in sales. What in the past, to use the old SaaS model terminology, what in the past we asked an SDR or a BDR can do, they can do more with this tool. But in order to get those results, managers must manage. They've got to stay in touch with buying. They have to know what are the key tasks, and they have to put in place the right incentive systems, training and development, etc. That I think is the bottleneck in sales, the management part, not the technology part.
Tech sales is an amazing career path where you can make as much as doctors and lawyers without having to cut anyone open or work ungodly hours. Looking back 10 years later, having personally started out in tech sales at Oracle, then moved to Google Cloud and a startup, and now fully launching into entrepreneurship, I can say with confidence that tech sales transformed my life through the income that it produced, the skill development, the connections, and the self-development that I unlocked along the journey. If you're someone who wants to strategically build your own six-figure tech sales career without wasting valuable time and earnings potential, then consider Tech Sales Accelerator and our 12-week programs as your blueprint. Our partners are breaking in and crushing quota at top companies like Oracle, Google Cloud, VMware, and Salesforce, leveraging our in-depth video content, one-on-one coaching, community, and network access. And we'd love to partner with you too to accelerate your own success on this path. If you'd like to learn more about Tech Sales Accelerator and our programs, then feel welcome to book time at my Calendly link, linked in the description of this video, and we'll walk you through all the details. Or just download my free cold calling system that's going to help you crush the phones quickly, also linked in the description of this video. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Do you think that AI technology will reduce the amount of sales jobs because companies can now maybe get these sellers on steroids that are good with AI, and so they need less sellers? I'm curious to get your take because I've had some people on and they don't have, honestly, your credibility, although some of them are top. They're thought leaders in their own ways. But I'd love to hear from you on this. Like, do you think AI will reduce sales jobs?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I or any of your other guests or you or anyone else has credibility around predictions like that. You know the old saying, predictions are risky, especially about the future. The predictions about the past are always easy. It's the ones about the future. And the reality is, and I want to emphasize this, the reality is 98% of what you're currently reading about AI in any area is what is called armchair thinking. It's basically people extrapolating from current X to the future. That's not what happens in a truly revolutionary technology. So I don't claim that credibility. Now, what does it mean for the number of sales jobs? First of all, what do we mean by a sales job? I'll get back to my initial comment. If you're a managing director at an investment bank, if you're a partner at a consulting firm, you're not called a salesperson, but business development is 80% or more of your job. Chris, I don't care whether we call that asparagus or something else. It sounds like sales to me. I don't see that going away. That's comment number one. Comment number two, and this gets me back to the erroneous predictions about e-commerce and sales for the last 25 years. What's at the heart of those erroneous predictions is a fundamental misunderstanding of buying and selling. Buying, shopping has always been a social experience as well as an economic transaction. That is true in B2B and tech sales as well.
Okay.
And that's not going to go away because of technology. It didn't go away because of the pandemic. So at the end of the day, that's the other element that in some respects is not affected by the technology. People do business with people. What does that mean for the absolute number of people in sales? I don't know. You don't know. Neither do the other self-appointed prophets. But remember what we mean by sales. For me, sales is about business development. I'm pretty sure there'll still be business development activities a century from now.
Yeah. I was talking with my Uber driver and I actually started yelling. I got heated about it, how, AI, how that will impact sales. And he's like, I heard from maybe these armchair folks, as you described, talking about AI eliminating sales. And I, coming from a B2B tech sales background, working with Oracle, Google Cloud, a cloud services company that partners with AWS and Google, these are large transformations and transactions that long deal cycles, working across different stakeholders. And I was like, hey, there's no way AI is going to take our place for these types of engagements, right? You can't take a CIO out to dinner. AI can't do that, right? And I just want to get your thoughts on this, and then we'll move to, I want to ask you about the complexity of sales and how it fits in a strategy, why it's the most costly part of strategy, things like that. But
let me just say, I agree with what you just said. It won't take the place of the problem solver, the solution, solution sales, as we've said for decades. But what that place is, where the value is added by the smart, customer-centric human being that we call a salesperson, that changes, but it's always been changing. I mean, you held up my book, and I thank you very much for that. How to sell in a world that never stops changing. It never stops changing, I will show you articles written in the 1930s. That's a long time ago. It's almost a century. There's a new technology diffusing across the United States. It's called the telephone. And I will show you articles in Fortune magazine and other places saying this is going to eliminate sales. Because once you have a phone and I have a phone, why don't we just call each other up? Why do we need a salesperson for that? I'll show you more articles from the 1960s when the national highway system was being built throughout the United States. The article saying the same thing. We're going to disintermediate salespeople and wholesalers because now you can just drive and compare prices. In the 1990s, more articles when the internet was diffusing. It was, you're probably not old enough to remember, but the internet was called the information superhighway. So these predictions are not new.
Frank, that's incredible, man, that you have this wisdom to look back. You've done the work and to point back to the 1930s. Like, that is an insight we've never gotten on this podcast with hundreds of episodes with top people.
Well, so in general, business executives who I deeply respect. I mean, look, I ran a business for 11 years. Being a professor is easier than running a business. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But in general, business executives, because they're so busy and because of what they need to manage, they have zero sense of history. I don't mean a little, I mean zero. And it helps. The past is not the present and the future, but, we do learn certain things by looking at business history.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I don't know. I read in the Bible once, and whether someone's religious or not, that's beside the point. But there was I think it's is it Ecclesiastes or something? There's some metaphor about how things go around in circles. I'm keeping it super high level, but every generation we think we're different and unique, and the problems are different and unique. But you're kind of just illuminating that it's like a walk around the cul-de-sac again and again. Things we have this new pattern emerge, or the same old pattern, right?
There is nothing new under the sun, I think. Exactly. That's the quote. I'm not sure, with all due respect to a magnificent author, I'm not sure I agree. There are new things under the sun, but there's still day and night. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and to think that the phone was invented and we thought that would eliminate or reduce sales, when it led to cold calling, one of the highest converting sales channels, and in outbound. It's just so funny. So, wow, Frank, this already been such a great conversation. Where I want to take us next is to talk about sales and its cost and complexity. It's because you're a thought leader when it comes to the role sales plays in strategy, because there weren't people really talking about that. And then you came into the place to talk about it. So tell us about the cost and complexity of sales as a part of strategy and how it fits into business.
Well, I mean, I think part of my contribution to the scholarship, and for that matter now the everyday discourse about sales, has been to point out that sales should be aligned with strategy. At the end of the day, if you look at the numbers in companies, the amount of money and time that companies spend on their sales forces annually, and by that money I mean hiring, training, compensation, travel, etc., that number is routinely more than some of the biggest CapEx projects that companies invest in, but it's usually managed much less rigorously. And historically, at least, it's managed almost separate from the company's business strategy, even though, especially in B2B firms, the sales organization is by far the most expensive and important part of strategy execution. So I think part of my contribution is saying, look, that's one of the ways you've got to measure and manage this important resource. It is also among the more complex areas of business to manage because it brings together a number of things. And if I can really be irreverent, Chris, my experience is that many, many people in tech don't get this because of their engineering background. When they talk about sales and the future and AI and everything else, their basic mental model is data analytics. You know, that if I do enough analytics, the answer pops out. That's rarely the case in business. And sales is a good example. Sales is a combination of data. By the way, data is everywhere these days. Companies that tell you they don't have the data, they're usually wrong. They have the data, they just don't know what the questions are, right? Mm-hmm. That's why management counts. It's a combination of data. It's a combination of understanding buying criteria and understanding that a market or a segment in the history of business has never bought anything. Only customers buy. Only individual accounts buy. That's what I mean by buying criteria. That's part of the value added of good salespeople. It's a combination of basic economics plus all the complexities of managing people. Any sales force is usually composed of heterogeneous skills and capabilities. And what I mean by that, Chris, is that most people are not like you and me. They're not perfect. They're good at certain things. They're not as good at other things. You've got to manage that heterogeneity. All of that comes together in sales in a stew that's usually much more complex than any other functional area of the business. So those are my points. You've got to align sales with strategy, and doing that alignment is not easy because of that complexity, but it's necessary.
So when it comes to sales, it is helpful to be data driven. And there is a logical side, but man, isn't it really an emotional dance as well? And so I'm just curious, I didn't expect to ask you this, but your thoughts on just high level, like the importance of ultimately the emotional experience for sellers in influencing the probability of winning a deal, like the role that plays. And it kind of boils down to relationships, understanding. But so Frank, I didn't expect to ask you this. I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'll get back to what I said earlier. People do business with people, even if they use social media, AI to search for the alternatives, the comparables, etc. Whenever you're dealing with people, there is an emotional component. That said, Chris, I would say two things. One is the level of the emotional versus, I guess the alternative is the economically rational. But that level of the emotional varies very, very highly depending on the nature of the purchase. Now, obviously there are many consumer goods and others where emotion is most of it. And by emotion, I mean, I'm sending a signal about who I am, etc. There, at the other extreme, there are B2B categories where, because your job is on the line for this purchase, if you make a mistake, your history, you're going to look at this not simply emotionally. And then there is everything in between. Second comment I'll make, this one, I'll make it without naming names. As a general rule, when sales trainers and salespeople talk about the emotional element in buying, my experience is that they tend to overstate it. It's there. Of course it's there. But it's many times, especially in B2B, it is the necessary icing on the cake. It's not the cake. The cake is the ability to understand what is the use case, what is going on at the customer, etc. And then all the other activities are important for making that cake presentable.
Frank, I think back to our old podcast and I had a flashback. This was years ago, but it was an insight that stuck out. I just have to throw it in there before we get to talking about the old way, the linear way of selling, and then parallel streams. So another bonus question is, you had said in the past that sales is very context specific. And I noticed that I've been left my tech sales job and I'm coaching sellers at different companies. One is at an AWS services partner in Canada. Another's at a SaaS company in the United States. Another, I have someone in Scotland. It's kind of cool, but with this virtual world, we can connect. So
good for you, Bussing. You're developing your business.
Let's go. I'm trying to get to where you're at, where you've just made a huge impact, man, and you continue to. But that's my goal. So thanks for being a mentor and example for me. And so, Frank, I gave you some examples. There's different contexts. Isn't sales context specific? I just like your high level thoughts on the importance of context in sales and what that might mean.
Yeah, well, it is context specific. I mean, selling, I probably said this in our previous conversation. I honestly don't remember, but selling software is different than selling capital goods. It's different than selling professional services,
yes,
and so on. It depends on what you're selling. It also depends on where and to whom you're selling. It's also culturally specific. Selling in Silicon Valley in North America is different than selling in Latin America, the Middle East, Asia. If you do many of the things that tech salespeople in the United States do in the Middle East or Malaysia, not only will you not close the sale, you may get thrown out of the room. So it's culturally specific as well. But this should not surprise us because, again, sales more than any other function in a business deals with the external world. And the external world does not adapt to you as a salesperson. It's your responsibility to adapt to that buyer, that culture, that need, etc. It's just more
Wow.
true in sales.
Frank, I just did a podcast with one of my buddies who exceeded me in sales. He made $1.7 million. Well, he closed enough to get that. And now the company is like going to pay him 400K a year over the coming years. I mean, it's amazing, right? That you can achieve that level of success. And he basically, his mindset is what you described, which is like, he basically said, I don't worry about trying to change the world to get it to adapt to the way I want it. I adapt to the way the world is and what works. And it's a high level principle that you described of adapting to your customers, the context of the culture. You got to understand how the world works, or the maybe room, I'll use that metaphor, you're playing in works. And that's actually what makes the difference. So I don't know.
And there's very good research about this. Again, some of it's in the book you held up, but this is called adaptive selling. And there's research about how people do this in different contexts. So again, this is a basic fact, but notice if you're a sales consultant, if you are a sales trainer and you've got a methodology, your incentive is not to say this is different than this. Your incentive is to say my methodology will work here, there, and in other places. Buyer beware. It's up to the salesperson and the buyer to understand when that is relevant and when it is not. Something else is.
Frank, let's talk about the old linear way of selling. And I know there's like an acronym for it that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. And then the new way of parallel streams that you talk about in your book. I'd love to understand where we were, where we're going, and the differences.
Well, I mean, the way that buying, and again, I got to get back to this core basic fact. The most important thing about selling is the buyer. All right.
So Frank, I was saying selling, but you are just, we got to double down for the audience to understand this. You're focused on the buying process.
But I'm focused on that because of what it tells us about selling. The way that buying has been thought about for over a half century, and as a result, the way people have thought about what it is that a sales model and a salesperson must do is in terms of a linear process. And you see this reflected in the common metaphors that are used to talk about sales. We talk about sales funnels, pipelines, this linear progression. And it's built on a view of buying that's usually captured through an acronym, AIDA, AIDA, as in the opera, moving the buyer from awareness, are they aware of what we sell, to interest, why should they be interested, to desire, and then action, which usually means closing the sale. That's just not the way buying occurs in the vast majority of product categories by the third decade of the 21st century. Buyers are online and offline multiple times during their customer journey. As I said earlier, they're getting information not just from your company, your people, your websites. They're getting information from AI search, from influencers in many categories, in B2B, especially in tech, from buyer forums where they get unedited opinions about the product, the service, etc. So it's not a linear process. It's an omni-channel buying process. That's the major challenge facing most sales organizations, dealing with that omni-channel buying reality. That's the difference between the linear and the way buying happens now. And this is not going to go away. You're not going to put that genie back in some funnel, in some linear process.
Frank, can you walk us through the parallel streams? And I don't know if you called it this, but I saw the 4 E's, and I can refresh you on it. I'm trying to think. It was explore, evaluate, engage, experience. But I just love your high-level thoughts on the parallel streams and maybe those 4 E's.
Well, what I call the 4Es in my book is just to be blunt, a pretty generic high level framework. The way those parallel streams occur, again, it's a context specific activity. It's going to depend upon the product category, the market, and so forth. But the basic point is that it's not this linear AIDA pipeline. It's omni-channel. The buyer's online, offline, getting different sources of information in a way they just weren't as recently as 20 or 25 years ago. A good example, I think, just a sort of anecdotal example that gets at this. At Harvard Business School in the previous decade, when we taught marketing, we would have a number of cases about direct-to-consumer companies, Casper Mattress, Warby Parker, and so forth. And the basic teaching point for the MBA students was, boy, look how smart these companies are. They disintermediate the retailer. They keep the margin for themselves. They use that money to build an online relationship with the consumer. Now, fast forward 10 years. If you look at virtually all of those companies, Casper, Warby Parker, Bonobo, almost all of them, they have all either opened their own stores or they're now selling through brick and mortar retailers. Now, why are they doing that? They're not doing that because they woke up in the morning and said, wow, great business idea. Let's increase our fixed costs. They're doing that because they must respond to the fact of omni-channel buying behavior in their markets. Same is true in the majority of B2B categories. Same is increasingly true in most tech categories, as God bless, most tech tools and platforms, because of the glory of competition, come down in price. That's my basic point. If you're Casper, of course you have a website. Of course you're doing e-commerce, but you've also got stores. You're also selling through whatever it is, the big mattress retailers, etc.
Hiring salespeople is very expensive. And if you get it wrong, it's really expensive. And in your book, you talk about people and how to find the right people, who to hire, and how to get it right. And then you go on to talk about sales training as well. But can we start with how to find the right people? Who are the right people to hire in sales? And then from there, we could build on it. I'll guide us to talk about how to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to notice that there are challenges in sales hiring that just don't exist to the same extent in many other areas. Because, for example, if you want to hire someone to work in finance or accounting, you can go to a school and find people that majored in those topics. The same is true with computer programmers. The same is true with engineers. But in sales, and this is an area where, believe it or not, the United States is actually much better than the rest of the world. Of the 4,000 plus colleges and universities, less than 300 even offer a sales course, let alone a sales program. So vast majority of these people start their careers in sales knowing very, very little about what they're going to get paid for, right? So on the hiring side, how do you get better at this? I would suggest you start with a couple of things. The first, and I want to insist on this because, it'll sound insulting to many people, but all I can do is tell you what I've seen in 30 plus years of working with very, very good people and companies. The first thing is to know what you're looking for. And that's important. If you talk to most sales executives and say, who are you looking for in sales? What are the things you're looking for? If you look at their job descriptions, it's basically this long checklist that only Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo could fulfill. some Renaissance man and woman. And when you can find Da Vinci or Michelangelo, I strongly suggest hiring them. They're pretty good. But there are a few Renaissance men and women out there. What are you looking for? How do you figure out what you're looking for? Again, get back to buying, and therefore, what are the important sales tasks? That's the second thing. What is it that we believe our salespeople must do and can do that marketing can't do, that service can't do, that's not a product issue, etc. And then the third thing, and now we get more tactical, there is a dramatic over-reliance on using a couple of unstructured interviews to make judgments about whether a human being is fit for the job, etc. Now, what I'm about to say, Chris, is as close to an established fact as anything you will ever hear from a management professor. It is supported by 60 years of consistent research results. And I want to emphasize 60 years, consistent research results. The correlation between the evaluations people get in their job interviews and their subsequent actual on-the-job performance varies from about 0.2 to 0.4. In other words, even in the best of those circumstances, it's less than the 50-50 rate of flipping a coin. Managers vastly overrate their ability to judge someone's capabilities on the basis of a few interviews.
Yeah.
Now, I have colleagues who are very familiar with that research, and their basic advice is therefore don't interview. My own feeling is that only someone who's never managed a business can actually say that seriously. Of course you interview. People work with people, people hire people, but A, you must complement your interview with others. B, sales in particular is about behavior. It's not about whether Chris Bussing presents himself well in the interview. It's about whether Chris, what Chris actually does in front of customers. So you want to use assessments that get at that. And at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is establish internship type hiring scenarios. And by the way, those are more and more available. So long response, but that's the way I think about hiring. Hiring in sales is inherently tougher than in other areas, but many companies and many managers make it unnecessarily even tougher.
Yeah, it comes down to behaviors, like you said, and you don't know the behaviors until they're in the role, right? You can only guess at them. And some people, sellers, are really good at selling themselves, in an interview, and they seem great, and they're great. They even build the personal rapport, but the reality is, are they going to do the behaviors, and not just like, are they very effective on a presentation, but will they discipline themselves to put in the work every day, stuff like that.
And I think, and the reason I think it's silly to say, as some academics do, that therefore don't interview. What does interviewing teach you? At a minimum, it teaches you something about communication skills.
Yes.
Very, in sales, that's important. I have met very few really good salespeople that are mumblers. Now, I've met a few, but very few. You've got to be able, it doesn't matter how smart you are as a salesperson, how smart the buyer is. Neither of you are mind readers. This is something you do through the medium of language. You can tell whether people listen or not. Those basics, what I would call those basics. But again, sales is context specific. Once you get beyond that, it is about behavior on the job, not in the interview room.
Yeah. You know what? You could see someone's ability to connect with a C-level, even run a discovery call. It's funny, on interview, there's some parallels with a discovery call. Some of the principles are at work. And so you could get that confidence that they'll represent our company well in front of C-levels. The other thing I thought of, Frank, I'm just thinking out loud, is if they show some effort to go above and beyond to produce an asset like a 90-day, 30, 60, 90-day plan, or maybe, I don't know, tell me your thoughts on what you've seen, because I haven't hired for salespeople really. I've done interviews, but for a company that I was at, like when I was at Google. But if what if I gave them a project that showed their level of commitment and like could be a litmus for like, will they be committed to do whatever it takes to succeed? And are they truly invested in our vision, our company? So that's just, have you ever seen that? That was just coming from the gut with no actual experience,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is I have, but if I'm completely honest, Chris, I think you're being much too abstract about this.
Got it.
I think the most concrete thing in what you said is giving somebody a project. Can you do this? Do this. I don't know what the project is. You got to tell me about buying at company X, or what something can work with. The story I always tell, I ran a business for 11 years. It was a professional services firm. Oh. And until we reached 40 people, I interviewed for every position, everything, sales down to, the administrative assistant. After that, it got too big. And I would always say the same thing to people that I was interviewing. And that is, this is a services business. It's all about people. You have to understand that. Are you okay with that? And I always remember after a few years of doing that, I was interviewing this real wise guy. And when I said that to him, he said to me, oh, people? Oh, some of my best friends are people. And at first, to use your, a version of the French, I was pissed off. I thought, well, who is this wise ass? Does he want the job or doesn't he want the job? What kind of response is that?
Yeah.
But then later, as I thought about it, I said, if I'm going to be that abstract, are you okay with people? Maybe I deserve a response like that. And I think that hiring managers who are abstract, we want you have to show empathy. You have all these cliches that we see in so much of hiring, especially in sales. Maybe they deserve a response like that as well. It's the responsibility of the hiring company and the hiring manager to get more specific. And in sales, it's about buying and the key tasks. It's not about can you do can you jump tall buildings. It's about buying and the key tasks. That's what managers get paid for in my estimation.
Absolutely. And so what we just fleshed out is for the quote unquote project, it would be something very specific, which companies do this, right? Run a mock discovery call. We're going to be executives and they have to put in work to prepare an approach to the discovery call and a presentation, or build a territory plan for here's the context and get specific. And so I think, Frank, like those are maybe specific examples. And a lot of companies use sales exercises to see skills, but also like the level of.
I think that helps. But again, it depends on the company, territory plan. I would argue in most sales models I'm familiar with, it's the responsibility of the sales manager.
Yeah.
Here are the priorities. All right. Now you figure out which is which in your territory or the leads I'm giving you. But whatever that project it is, it has to be tied to what the manager knows are the important sales tasks in the current environment. Because there's so much bias in this. Someone who does this, someone who makes a good first impression and then does the task, the manager tends to say, "Whoa, what a smart young man or woman." Someone who makes a poor first impression and does the task just as well, the manager says, "Oh, I don't know." So, at the end of the day, the gold standard here is behavior in front of customers. That's why I get back to internship type hiring scenarios, which is what companies do, but they do it dishonestly. The reality is in most companies, you hire a salesperson, and after 90 days, 120 days, they don't work out. What's going to happen? They're going to get fired. Let's make this formal with milestones and what it is we're both going to do during these 120 days. That's what I mean by an internship scenario. And it just tells you so much more
Yeah.
than any project or assessment or all these cute little things that people talk about when they're hiring. And most of them are basically ways to justify a gut instinct hiring decision. That's what I've discovered after 30 plus
Wow.
years.
Let's forget the cute, cut through the bullshit like we just did, and look at assessing for behaviors and the internship. I don't know if it's outside the box, but it's something I wasn't thinking of that it's golden. So I love it.
It's not outside the box. Amazon does this. A lot of companies do it.
Yeah.
But it's not cute.
Yeah. And you know what? I was just talking to an SDR manager at Ramp, which is probably the #1 fintech in New York City. And she just got their internship program going. So to your point,
By the way, Ramp, HBS people start up some in my course. Good for them.
No way. Okay. I'm actually going to give a talk to their SDRs coming up. I'm excited. What a company. And there's some folks like Michael Karp who have followed this channel for years that got a job thanks to the content from people like yourself, and of course some of my own too. So it is fun to see those synergies. Frank, we got a couple more topics to hit on, and then we're going to round it out. We have about 9 minutes. So we are going to finish off with some sales and marketing, but okay, it came back to me. Here's what we want to ask you about. Companies, firms are spending 20% on, I'm trying to think the statistic you said, 20% more on sales training than other functions, and they're not getting a good return on investment. And so can you talk about the purpose of the importance of sales training and how to approach it in a way that delivers a better ROI?
Yeah. The figure is 20% more per capita.
Per capita?
Person, right?
Can you just distinguish what that means for the audience?
Well, per capita means per person. In other words, you're spending a fifth more per training per salesperson than you are in any other function of the business. It's usually the biggest single pot of training and development dollars in firms that have a sales force. And the issue there is it's a bit like public education in America. The issue is not, do we spend money? We spend a ton of money on education in the United States. The issue is how we spend it. The poor ROI for sales training, there are a couple of systemic issues behind that. One is most sales training is episodic. And what I mean by that, it's linked to when we're usually introducing a new product or something like that. And what many companies do is then we bring in the salespeople. We spend a day or two, with this avalanche of information that we give them. And what learning and development people call the forgetting curve is very, very steep. In other words, most of those salespeople forget 80% of what they learned in that seminar within 60 days after the seminar, right? So that's one reason. The second is you have to understand how adults learn, not just in sales, but across business areas. Adults are not studying for the final exam in a course. That's not what they're doing, whether it's a training seminar or anything else. Adults tend to pay attention to information on the job when they need it and where they need it, not days, weeks earlier or later in a training seminar. That's called just-in-time learning. And this is an area where technology can and should be the friend of sales trainers. There are now many user-friendly technologies that allow you to get information to the salesperson on their way to making a sales call or even during the sales call itself. And those technologies backed up with knowledge about good learning processes can really help. And then the third thing is, and this is more specific to sales, you have to understand what really makes an impact in sales learning. And what research tells us is the biggest impact is not made by the sales trainer or some professor that you bring in for training. Most salespeople learn the most from the best of their peers. They watch those peers in action and basically pick up tips. The way you dealt with that price objection, that's clever. I'm going to use it. The way you framed the value proposition there, that's called modeling behavior. And it's the single biggest driver of learning in sales. And again, this is an area where technology helps. We now have technologies that allow you to diffuse those best practices much more widely and efficiently. So those would be the issues about sales training.
Modeling behavior, finding the best at your company and stealing what works, obviously, it might be a cheat code. And in academics, you're in school, you don't want to cheat for tests, but I mean, hey, there's something to be said for quote unquote cheating and stealing.
I would use different language. I mean, if you and I are working in a sales force and you do things that work and that are smart, why wouldn't I'm not cheating, I'm not stealing. Yeah. I'm learning. I'm getting better. I mean, what's this? I think that moralistic language is completely out of place.
I think you're right. I was trying to have fun with it and create a contrast, but it's not moralistic at all, and it's the thing that you should be doing. And it's just interesting to think that the best sales trainers are actually the top performers, but it's on an individual to seek out that mentorship. Sure. And do you think there are things that companies can do or leadership can do to encourage maybe a culture of sharing? And have you seen
there are, but the first thing I would do is I wouldn't use words like mentoring or that. Modeling behavior is not about mentoring. It's not about you sitting down with me and saying, now, Frank, my job is to make you a better salesperson and human being. Every minute you spend doing that is a minute you're not selling. And the best salespeople don't want to do that and should not want to do that. Modeling behavior is creating opportunities, whether it's through technology, ride-alongs, or whatever, for me to go along and observe you. So that's number one. Number two, we do get back to culture. The old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah. Not true. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Oh. You either have a culture where, Chris says to Frank, sure, come along. You'll learn something watching me, or you don't, right? Now, compensation and incentives usually has some impact on that, but this is what managers get paid for. This is what I meant earlier by managers must manage. Managers need to know who is the best model for this. Where is it that Frank is good already and where he needs to be better? And then how do I establish an atmosphere in the organization where people are not only learning from each other, but it's a norm that we expect to learn from each other. I have found that using words like mentoring gets in the way. I used to have a lot of hair. I have rarely, and I mean rarely, ever seen a formal mentoring program that has any impact whatsoever.
Wow. I think of JC Pollard, who came on the podcast, and he's a top seller at Gong. He actually got promoted into leadership, and he's got a good brand he built, and he's really good at like cold calling and things like that. And when I'd asked him about how he became so good, he said, people would come to me and say, how are you blowing me out of the water with my metrics? And he said, did you see how many hours of calls I listened to in Gong? And so that was an example to your point of modeling behavior can come through technology and being able to listen to those recordings. So if an organization has that type of technology in place, that's pretty special. And a seller they actually, I mean, they don't even have to interact with the person. Like you said, trying to pursue a mentorship, they can listen to the call recordings.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know Pollard, but I think he's saying the right thing. What he's basically saying is, hey, do your homework. And by the way, there's a very accessible way to do it here. That's what I meant by technology. Gong is good, and it's one of many technologies now available.
So, Frank, what's cool is you are Mr. To me, Sherp on the Hill. And maybe it's like Luke and Yoda right here. That's a funny metaphor, but it's cool that you have the data and the wisdom and the years of history. And I can share some anecdotes as proof points of okay, here's the story of Frank, what he's saying is exactly right. And so I feel like that's been a fun dynamic. Now I have one more topic for you, but we are about to be on the minute mark. Or is it okay if we talk about this final topic? We could go a little bit over.
I can, and then I do have to get on.
Yeah, this is I promise the final topic, right? And thanks to you focused us in because we could film many podcasts, but this was the perfect timing. So sales and marketing, final topic. Can you talk about some of the interplay between the two, what they look like in the ideal world, and some of the differences? They would love to hear your perspective.
Well, I'm just giving our time three broad comments. One is, again, sales is context specific, but as a general rule, one of the things that technology is doing is making what have always been interdependent activities, sales and marketing, making them more interdependent. I mean, examples, SaaS businesses are a good example. If you look at the way most SaaS businesses historically generated leads, content marketing, etc. As recently as a decade ago, that upfront content marketing and lead gen was clearly a marketing activity. Now technology allows the sales group to do that. And the issue is, do they know what they're doing? All right. There's a reason we had marketing people. That's comment number one. Comment number two is I think it's a mistake. Many companies look at what I just said, they agree, and they say, oh, therefore, we've just got to meld them. No, they're different jobs. Marketers get paid to think in terms of groups, segments, markets, etc. Good salespeople, when they're good, they're about individual customers and accounts. The basic units here differ. And then the third thing, I think, is, and again, this is an area where technology is impacting things, but at the end of the day, we have to get back to what are the key tasks. And that, for me, is a managerial responsibility. I have reached the point in my life where I'm just bored when I attend board meetings or, strategy meetings, and I have to listen to the next teamwork speech. All right. It doesn't hurt. I'm not sure how much it helps for more than 10 minutes. It's the responsibility of managers to understand these activities, marketing, these activities, sales, and these are the rules of engagement. This is what marketing needs from sales to do its job. This is what sales needs from marketing to do its job. That's something managers need to manage, not people who sort of say, oh, we're part of the same team. Those would be my three general comments about what's a much, much bigger topic.
And hey, this has been an unbelievable conversation. What a unique opportunity for myself and the audience to learn from you. And I just want to encourage the audience to check out the book. I mean, this is a beautiful book. I've had it for a bit now, and it was fun rereading it, Sales Management That Works. And it's going to position you to sell in a world that is constantly changing. And today we learned some timeless principles and data-driven, really like sales truths. So Frank, thank you so much. I look forward to sharing this with our audience and having you on again in the future to talk more about marketing and other topics. But any final words of encouragement for the audience before we tie a bow on the conversation?
Not really. I guess I'm a proponent of what they call tough love. we're right now we're in very, very uncertain times for reasons I don't need
Yeah.
to rehearse. It is affecting sales. Anyone who tells you that buyers are more prone to buy in this environment, I don't think is telling the truth. All I can say is, I like to always quote that comment you hear in the gangster movies. Remember, you chose this life, so you've got to stick with it.
We chose this life. Frank, thank you for choosing to allocate some time to share with us today. To the audience, thank you for choosing to be a part of this conversation and for investing in your personal and professional development. To your success in tech sales, in broader sales, and in life, happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one.